Hello and welcome to GAA Embedded, our GAA service here on Balls.ie, where we bring you the most in-depth analysis of the hurling and football championships. Now, every Monday we are here live on Monday morning to look back on the best of the weekend's action. It's all hurling this weekend. We'll catch up with Darren O'Sullivan next week. There's lots of football to talk about, but we'll have all football next week, but it's hurling this week. What a week it's been. We'll talk to Tipperary legend Shane McGrath in just a couple of minutes. Later on the show then as well, we'll have Maurice for the first in a series of his GAA Embedded articles went out last week where he talked about hand signals and Gaelic football. We'll get in depth with him on that and talk a little bit about the football games from the weekend as well. We have to keep things, the really important issues are discussed on this show. So we'll be talking about GAA haircuts, of course, because again, these are the important things. And of course, we'll guess the handicaps later on. Gary and PJ are standing by. Gary looking to retain his title as we go into the football weekend next week. But what a weekend of hurling. It's time to talk about it. 4 incredible matches, shocks, controversy, a little bit of controversy, and great skill, extra time, the whole shebang. Let's talk about it right now with Shane McGrath. Shane, how are you doing? That was I don't know if I'm quite recovered from it. We talked last week about four games and the championship really kicking off and us suddenly being into a place where we knew who the provincial finals are, but all 4 games had their own story in a way, and all of them lived up to hype in their own way.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, it was going to be a feast or a famine, and we expected we get a feast, and we did. In between one thing or another, as you said, there was lots of controversy, and I suppose it is a little bit of a pity maybe that the controversy is probably taken over from a lot of the good hurling that went on as well. So look, lots to talk about. 4 games, 4 very different games as well, Mike. I think you had. Yeah. I suppose me and you were chatting over the weekend as well, and we said, the art of defending, while a lot of people were saying it's gone, it was very much to the forefront in, I suppose, maybe 3 of the games at the weekend anyway. Definitely in 2 of them anyway. So that was great to see, and some individual displays, outstanding individual displays in defending types. And, maybe we haven't seen a defender get hurler of the year in some time, but maybe this will be the year that could happen. And I suppose two guys in particular, I suppose, 2 cornerbacks, they've been referred to as the creme de la creme of cornerbacks. Cathal Barrett yesterday did a great job, Tony Kelly, and I thought Sean Finn was outstanding against Cork as well, and I thought Sean O'Donoghue was outstanding. But look, we'll probably talk about it more, but look, a great weekend of hurling. You won't keep everyone happy, Mike. I'm sure some people were happy with the low score and some people were not happy with the higher score. Bit of banter on Twitter there. People were saying in the Dublin Galway game, what are we going to do? There's no scoring anymore in hurling. We'll have to make the slitter heavier. So look, that's
lighter, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, that was probably the story of the week in a way, was Dublin's win over Galway and how much you need that, and we'll get to that. But let's actually just get the controversy out of the way then early, right? Because I mean, as a tip man, you probably said, like, what's the big deal? There's decisions in the course of a game. Maybe. I've seen some people saying that. While nobody necessarily agreed with it, there's James Owens giving the referee. As a Clare man, I'm apoplectic about it. But then I suppose the day after is the time to kind of reflect with a cooler head and say, like, what? You might have heard this. Like, there was discussions all the way through I suppose the spring or even the early summer in this case about what this rule, before the league even came back, about what was going to happen in this rule. And I actually heard the hypothetical of, what if a guy is dragged down on the sideline? Is that a penalty? Is that a yellow card? And does it put referees in an impossible position where they have to be judge, jury, and executioner in a very, very quick manner as to what defines a goal chance? And, Brian Lowton wouldn't excuse James Owens for that, and I completely see where he's coming from. But it also just puts a needless pressure on a referee, doesn't it? Like, outside of whether he was right, wrong, or indifferent.
Yeah, I suppose I look at it 2 ways, Mike, right? I look at it as a hurling fan first and foremost, and I can look at it maybe from the officials or the referee's point of view secondly. So from a hurling fan's point of view, right? So I was there as a tip fan yesterday. If I was to role reverse, and if, let's say Dan McCormack, who was lined out to play wing forward for us, had taken down David Reedy in the same manner, in the same position, and Clare got a penalty and Dan McCormack got the line for us, I would be absolutely furious. And I think most hurling people, even a lot of tip people at the match yesterday, I was in the stand there yesterday, and all the tip crowd around me, we thought, right, free here for Jo. It was 113. I think the score at the time, we were down 2 points at the time. So we thought, look, we'll bring it back to a point here. Jay will get the free, difficult free now, very, very tight angle. Like, I'll be honest, everybody in the Gaelic grounds yesterday, Clare and Tip fans, couldn't believe that Jason Ford was lining up to take a penalty. And I'd say the Tip players couldn't either. So like from a fan's point of view, you know, we a lot of people just couldn't believe the decision. It was a foul, probably was a yellow card. So, you know, from that point of view, like from a hurling point of view as well, this clear goal scoring thing, and I'll talk about it in a second about what Fergal Horgan said earlier in the year, and he probably came across Mike as probably the top referee in the country over the weekend because of the way he reffed the game. But a lot of people don't know Fergal Horgan would have played the game at a very, very high level, you know, with underage teams with Tip and being involved, you know, with Tip the whole way up along, and has proven himself to be a top referee. Like if Jake Maurice, I think he's 32, 33 meters. There was a tweet going around there that he was actually closer to the Ennis Road than he was to the goalpost. And even if he gets the ball in his hand, that's his first catch. So he's 32 meters. He's going to solo on. There's 2 or 3 Clare defenders coming back in the picture. They'll definitely be back. And obviously the goalie there as well. By the time he puts the ball, gets his second catch, he still could be potentially 25, 26 meters from the goal. So is that a clear goal scoring opportunity? I don't know. Now, if I could just say what the sin bin is, right? The sin bin is it punishes a trip, a pull down, or a careless use of hurley on an attacking player with a goal scoring opportunity inside the 20-meter line or the semicircle, or the D as we call it. That's fair enough. The areas for consideration are where the foul occurred, how many defenders between the attacker and the goal, could another defender make a tackle, and how many players are in the area in front of the goal. Now, what Fergal Horgan said earlier in the year was, if it's a clear and obvious goal scoring chance, that's not the rule. If it's a goal scoring opportunity, it's not clear. And it's only the referee on the day that can call whether it's a sin bin or a penalty or not. It's completely up to him. So basically, what this comes down to, Mike, is it's the matter of opinion of the referee on the day. Like the ruling is there, but it does come down to the matter of opinion on the referee on the day. And I think we could be here till the cows go home talking about it. James Owen's opinion yesterday was that Jake Maurice was 32 meters from the goals with not a defender clearly in sight, and that was a clear goal scoring opportunity. And I think for 99.9% of everyone else, it was not a clear goal scoring opportunity. And I suppose that's where the frustration comes from everyone. Like,
the one question I'd have about James, and I was saying it even on Twitter last night, we don't need to be, you know, James Owen doesn't need to be hung, drawn, and quartered about a decision made in a game, but it's easy to say he shouldn't be punished for a mistake either. Whereas I haven't heard anybody suggest that this was a mistake from an official channel or from James Owens himself. Not that he necessarily needs to be answerable, but you know, should a referee have a different opinion than 99.9% of hurling fans? You know what I mean? We can get into, you know, them understanding the rules better and so on and so forth, but you know, that suggests to me a massive problem. And that suggests to me, like, you know, is James Owens accountable for a decision like that? Should, in your opinion? I know we can be very harsh on referees sometimes, but it felt like even just watching last night in the Sunday game, it almost went the other way. It's like as if to say we can't say anything about a referee making a really poor decision here. Whereas like these things can be analysed, you know?
Oh yeah, I agree. Look, I think there's no one perfect. We all make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes in life. We make them every day of our life, and the people not making mistakes aren't making progress. But I'm saying, like, if a player makes a big mistake, he probably won't start the next day. You know, yes. So if a referee makes a big call like this, I'm not saying it's a punishment, but you know, do the referees committee come together and say, look, we maybe were considering you for a semi-final, and maybe we feel because of this decision, you know, you mightn't be in line to get to semi-final. Now, you know, I'm sure the referees are going to meet this week. They're going to look at it, and James Owens will say maybe technically he was right, but I suppose technically, you know, it just didn't make sense to I think everybody else in the broader community. We've seen the frustration with a lot of people, you know, both the Clare people and I suppose a lot of neutrals. Like it's and in fairness to Brian Lohan, it's not Tipperary's fault, you know, and it's not Tipperary players' fault. They took full advantage of it. Aidan McCarthy is a very physical, very fit guy, covers a lot of ground, and in the time he's off the field, it's been well documented. Tip scored 2-4 to 2 points for Clare. And that's the change in the game. But that's not Tipperary's fault, and fair play to Tipperary for taking advantage of it. Every other top team in the country would do the exact same thing while the guy is off the pitch. So, you know, I think that while we're all human, and I'm not saying there should be a punishment in this because it's not his job. It's not he's not a professional referee like a Premier League player. But I'm sure the referees have to say, look, for the really, really big games, maybe you're not at the top of the pecking order, maybe like you were before. And you know, the Fergal Horgans of this world who would have seen this and would have maybe just gave the free and the yellow card. So look, I do think while rules are there to help us with the game and everything, Mike, I feel that common sense sometimes has to come into it. And the other side of it is, You know, James Owens, he's a former Ireland final referee, I think 2015. Like he would be able to consult with 7 or 8 officials in Croke Park. I think maybe if you look back on it, and look, we've all had regrets in our careers, maybe he should have maybe done a little bit more consultation. I'm not saying bring in VAR, don't bring in VAR into hurling, but I'm just saying a little bit more consultation. You know, yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're all hooked up to each other. So.
Yeah, and look, it's all fair enough, and I want to move on to Tip and everything like that. But just as a player, as a viewer, as an analyst now, everything that you're involved in the game, like. I remember, like you were talking about, like sometimes you look at it almost from a neutral's perspective, even when you're a fan. I remember the All-Ireland semi-final in 2013, and Patrick Donnellan rugby tackle, I think Graham Mulcahy to the ground for when Clare were like 5-6 points up, and it was a point. And I remember thinking to myself, as much as I'm happy about like Clare winning here, I think something needs to be done about this. There was a rule that needed to come in, but they just went in this. They just made it vague. They made it complicated, and there was never a need for it. And it's a rule that, as I said, that's 2013 I'm talking about. We're a rule that's 10 years in the making here. And they just got it so wrong. So outside of even James Owens and you kind of reading out the rule there, it sounds all right. But when it's predicted that something like this would happen, it just seems to me it's like the GAA have a lot to answer for, I think, as well, in something like this. And again, we're after spending 10 minutes talking about it at the start of an unbelievable weekend of hurling.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the main talking point. Very, very little talk about who actually won the matches and the teams that actually lost. The teams that actually lost this weekend, I was just looking at it there now in time wise, right? They're going to have to win. I think it is 5 games in 35 days trying to become Ireland champions now for the teams that lost at the weekend. And I tell you, it's very hard going. They have to win 3 games, 21 days just to get back into an Ireland quarter final.
Yeah.
So look, that's tough going for the losers. But look, I don't feel there's anything maybe too wrong with the rule. I just feel maybe the interpretation of the rule, Mike, could be better. And I really hope the refs sit down and have a really good chat about it at their meeting this week to say, look, it wasn't the right call. Let's learn from this, and please God, let's never let it happen again for the rest of the championship anyway.
Yeah, there's common sense in sport, I think, a lot of the time for any fans, even if you're not an expert and that something like that resulting in a more or less guaranteed goal plus a sin bidding is too much for that particular foul. But I will say that the 2-4 to 2 points thing is interesting in a way that I think Tip haven't got enough credit for, because Limerick, when Peter Casey was sin binned, Limerick, I think, won that 10 minutes. Like 4-2 or something like that, low scoring, and they did it right. Clare, you could have an argument, didn't keep their heads. They were fairly wronged and maybe didn't adapt well enough, and that's going to be an experience thing for them and Brian Lohan going down the line. But Tip did, and I thought that was emblematic of an entire performance yesterday over 70 minutes, where I thought like the old dogs rose to the occasion. You mentioned Cottle Barrett earlier on. You saw like Paddy Maher very much struggling at the start of the game. Grew into the game. Brendan Maher. Jamie Callanan didn't get a touch, I think, for 20 minutes and ended up just playing this, what I would consider like this is sort of like this playing full forward with his brain rather than his brawn for the entire game. Some of the passes he did, some of the flicks, everything like that. And it was those guys that kind of won the game for Tip in the end, even though like it was a 50 or 20-man performance, I suppose.
Yeah, I tell you, we talk about the experience that they had in the field, and I said it there last week. I felt the experience would stand to them, and it really, really did. Like, Tip were 6 points down at one stage in the first half, Mike, and it was just real composure. Went on to score 1-5 in a row. But you talk about Shamey there, right? Shamey scored 1-1 from play yesterday. Now, himself and Conor Cleary did a fair battle, but the amount of running and the amount of balls that broke off Shamey, and even if you look back in the game, there's 2 points he's directly involved in, right, where he's actually fallen to the ground, but he gives a hand pass just as he's fallen. And it's just a frame of mind, like the experience to say, right, I mightn't get this in my hand. If I do take it in my hand, I might overcarry it. I might get swarmed by the Clare lads. And just the presence of mind just to flick it out. And, we got 2 points directly from that off Shamey. His goal, he'll say himself, he scored 37 championship goals now. It was probably the one of the luckiest ones he got. And the thing for Eibhear Quilligan is, if people watch it back, Eibhear Quilligan favours his left-handed tops. He's going to want to go to his right. And that shot actually goes to Eibhear Quilligan's left. And if you watch it, his wrist or his hands just aren't placed properly, and the ball just sneaks in under his hurley. Eibhear Quilligan made 2 or 3 top drawer saves now yesterday, but he'll be very disappointed personally from that one. And as you said, they picked off the few points because they were able to find the space, because we actually freed up, when I say we, Tipperary, freed up Paddy at the back. So Paddy had space while Aidan McCarthy was gone off, and what that allowed Tip to do was extra second on the ball to get a better quality ball in, and because of that, then we get 1-4 away aside from J.O.'s penalty. But the experience of the boys really stood through yesterday. Look, a lot of people are saying Noel came off there around the 50-minute mark. And for me, like, maybe that might be Noel now for us. Like, it might be get the most out of Noel, 50-55 minutes to second water break, and someone else comes on and an injection of energy, because Noel just has that vision. He could be involved in so much for that time. And like, I thought it was a really good performance in the second half yesterday by Tip, because you could get caught up in all the madness too, Mike. With everything that's going on, and the bit of a crowd there yesterday was brilliant. It was brilliant. Like, it did generate a bit of atmosphere, and I think you're going to see, Mike, as crowds get bigger as the year goes on, I think you'll see players making more mistakes, because we all know what it's like when no one's watching you. You don't feel the pressure, but as the crowds get bigger, I think you might see more of these little simple mistakes, players running out over the ball, misstriking the ball because of the crowd, and I think that's brilliant as well. That's what we want to see in our games. Like.
Absolutely, yeah. From a Clare point of view, I think there's probably disappointment there that they didn't keep the heads, and that they, even before that, there was a sense that they were kind of gone off. They played so well in the first half. Tip had weathered them, I would say, is probably a fair way to describe it. But Clare had done so well, and it seemed to be a really even contest. But just whacking the ball in to the target man, it just seems like it seems like an old-fashioned way of doing things, and it didn't. They almost like suffered from being with the wind in the second half, would you say?
Yeah, I think they did. I think they maybe came over reliant on Aaron Shanahan trying to win primary possession for them. As I said, I thought Cahill did a really good job on Tony Kelly. Now Tony Kelly popped up at 1-9. He would have got 1-1 from play. Now the goal he got, in fairness to Cahill, he had to commit for it, and it was a lovely little frick by Ian Galvin into him, and super finish by Tony Kelly. Look, you expect that. The point Tony Kelly got was ridiculous. Like, he was. He was nearly down a little taking the shot down the shot. Yeah. That's what he does. That's what you get from him. And you have to allow Tony Kelly 4 to 5 scores from open play in every game minimum. And Cahill Barrett kept him to 2. And I think that was a big part of Tip's foundation to build on for success there yesterday. Like, and in fairness to the rest of the Clare forwards, while it didn't happen for Tony Kelly, like Ian Galvin pops up at 1-2 inside the first quarter. Has to go off towards the end of the game, see him holding his leg. David Reedy was very lively. David Reedy was moving everywhere. He was looking for the ball, and he was causing Paddy a bit of problems. And they just kind of nearly went away from that then in the second half. I suppose losing the man and everything, and maybe their heads dropped and got a bit deflated. But they went away what worked well from them in the first half, Mike, if that makes sense. And to be honest, like, it was 3:23 to 2:17 coming in there to the last 10 minutes. And the last 5 scores in the game, Clare got them. So while Tip won by 4 points, I do feel Tip were 6, 7, 8 points a better team than they were yesterday. And a lot of people might know this, but Clare only had 2 wides in the last quarter, Mike, right? And if people watch it back, and it wasn't really mentioned now last night, I don't know if it was mentioned by anyone. I was in the Mackey stand. I was at that side. Tony Kelly had a shot. And I tell you, it was 100% a point. It was 4 or 5 yards inside the post, and all the Tip crowd were at that side of the Mackey stand, and we all just looked at each other, and all the the Sunday game crowd were up there as well, and we were like going, "Oh, sure, there's another point now for Tony Kelly," and your man waves it wide, and we were like, "If Tip only win this by a point, there's going to be war," because. And I don't know why it wasn't brought up, but it was this much inside the post.
You could see that on TV. I completely forgot about it, and I knew one that it just looked like a score, and then 2 was and on TV sometimes you could be wrong on that way, but then secondly it was like you knew from the way Kelly ran in at the umpire that those lads are never wrong on that. Like, you know what I mean? And it was just pushed off, and it kind of comes back to what we're saying, is that everything was defined by that Aidan McCarthy decision. Like in the match, it was like there was almost nothing. The Aaron Shanahan, was it a penalty? I see Tipper fighting back, saying that Heffernan was fouled first, and there's a million things to talk about. But Asher, look, it was
definitely a point. But Mike, as you were saying, it was lost in the madness of everything else going on, and because Aidan McCarthy, I think, was nearly getting ready to come back on at that stage and everything. But the whole tension of the crowd, Clare crowd, they were furious after the match. They were booing. I think that they actually didn't even notice it, because, as I said, you wouldn't really see it from the uncovered stand at the other side. It wasn't at that angle, but where I was sitting in the Mackey stand, it was a clear point. It was a clear point, and I don't know how there wasn't more made of it. But anyway, look, there wasn't. But as I said, inches, like, so they Mike Barry Heffernan and Aaron Shanahan, it's 6-1, half a dozen in the other. I think with that they were both wrestling, both testing the jerseys there when the ball came down. I suppose the Clare fans were feeling after they got hard done by the decision. Otherwise, usually the teams that get hard done by usually get those 50-50 calls, don't they? Like,
I thought that might I'll be the case. All right, I'm a little bit less adamant about that than I was. I'll come back. I'll say maybe it was 7-1 and 5 of the other rather than.
Yeah, okay.
I'm a little bit more magnanimous in that. Look, let's come out of our own teams here for a few minutes and talk about sort of some of Saturday's games, because, like Dublin beating Galway, you talk about maybe some fans creating some mistakes. Like Dublin were brilliant, but Galway, it has to be said, I don't think anyway we're at the races. Some of it was that Dublin not letting them play, but other would I'd be very worried if I was a Galway fan. But from Dublin's point of view, like they just needed this so much, didn't they, for Maddie Kenny, for the development of the entire sport in the county? Because you had the obviously the great Anthony Daly days. You had the big win over 2019 that was ruined in a way by what happened in the preliminary quarterfinal against Laois. And it was almost it was taken away that they'd not Galway out of the championship, and then a disappointing year last year. And it just felt like it could be. We were thinking during the league this year, is it slipping away from Dublin? Are they going to fall back down to where they're competing with Laois and Antrims? And it's anything but. We predicted it a little bit last week that was like they looked a really good side against Antrim, and they went out and proved it then.
Oh, they did, and like, geez, I made the worst call I'd say I've made in a long time. I thought Antrim actually beat them, and they just came and blew them away. And then even at the weekend, I thought, Galway, with the team they have and the panel they have and the way they were going in the league and the set of forwards they have, I thought, this is going to be Galway in the Leinster final, guaranteed. Number 2 team in the country to Limerick at the moment. Terrible call again. I'd say actually the only good call I made Saturday was to my mother to tell her I got the vaccine and everything was okay after it. You know that. So like. Oh, stop. But like I tell you about, we were talking about over the weekend, Mike, the art of defending was very, very clear to see with the Dublin lads there at the weekend. 118 to 114. They keep Galway now. Galway with forwards like, Joe Canning, Cooney, Brian Concannon, Evan Nyland coming on, Conor Whelan. They kept them to 1-8 from play for the whole match. That is phenomenal going. Galway scored 114 altogether. And, I'd be looking at the likes of, Owen O'Donnell. He's just a massive player. It's probably the only blip on the weekend for the Dublin lads is that with the hamstring injury. Hopefully he'll get back for them. But Keane O'Callaghan, the job he does, rocking that mullet inside the helmet. Paddy Smith. They're not going to be 9 or 10 out of 10 players, but they do their job really, really well, and they do their job for the team. Rush at centre back looking good there. Danny Sutcliffe in all-star form that he had from 2013. Dara Gray popping up with 2 points, and Chris Crummy, who we all maybe thought was a back, but the touch he made for the goal. Sure, any top forward, TJ Reid or anyone would be happy with the touch he made to kill the ball and put it in the net. But the art of defending was very, very clear to see. If you think about it, right? If I said to you before the match, Mike, Brian Concannon won't score from play, Joseph Cooney won't score from play, Adrian Toohey won't score from play. All right? Galway have 14 wides. And I do think a lot of this was to do with his injury. Joe had 6 of those wides on his own. Joe actually had 9 shots for his scores at the weekend. And I just feel I don't think his thumb is fully right, and I think maybe he has a slight rib injury as well. So I think that's very clear to see that any day that Joe Canning has 6 wides, he's just not fully right and he's not at the races. And to see Evan Nyland coming on taking over the frees was another indicator for me. But I just thought that, the first Leinster final for Dublin 2014, they just brought a workman-like performance, a team performance. It was phenomenal to see. I think Donald Burke, while he only scored 2 points from play, his wrist work around there, he takes mind in. Not the most physical guy, but his wrist work and the ball he can give in. As I said, Dara Gray. I thought Alan Nolan was in line for man of the match as well. I know Conor Burke covered the world of ground, and he does that job brilliantly, sitting deep for Dublin. I thought Alan Nolan, the saves, he made 3 or 4 top drawer saves, chipped in with a point, but his puck-outs as well, his vision for the puck-outs was excellent. So it's a great performance all over the field. And Mike, on the back of a very, very hard week for Dublin personally, with James Madden, going out to play for his county, burying his dad Noel there, and it was like to hear the interview saying that that's what his dad would have wanted, and for Matty Kenny as well, I believe had to bury his brother-in-law yesterday. So you imagine the emotion that was there beforehand. But to channel that emotion, that energy that, Owen Kelly used to always say to us that if you're nervous, it's good because nerves gives you energy. And sometimes emotion can go 1 or 2 ways for you. And I think the Dublin lads channeled that emotion into let's just go out and give the best performance we can for everybody, like, you know. And I think they really, really did that. And I'm sure everybody associated with that Dublin team and panel and their family were just so proud of them at the weekend by the way they performed. And then to beat Galway in the manner they did, 4 points. They never, ever fell behind once in the game as well, which I thought was a sign of a team that's really dominated the game. So I think you can only, you know, Dublin are going into the Leinster final now against Kilkenny, and you'd be afraid to tip against them now at this stage, you know, because I'd say the belief in the group is just unbelievable there after the weekend, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you mentioned Adam Nolan there. I'll talk about it a little bit later in the show with Maurice, but we have, I think, the rolling All Stars that we do every year. We're launched it tomorrow, where we try and pick the team as the year goes on. And I'm absolutely perplexed for goalkeeper, because you've got Adam Nolan, and this is only for a starting point, never mind at the end of the year. But you got Adam Nolan, you've got like Nicky Quaid, like that was just such a brilliant save, I thought, like, you know, and there's so much more to goalkeeping than saving, but some of the saves on display this week were absolutely fantastic. Like Owen Murphy as well. Obviously, he got the sin binning, but he in general, just like always the best keeper out there, it seems to me, you know, like saves all around really. Like in nearly every game, I think every keeper had some good saves. But it's Nolan for me definitely is someone that, like, the way he contributes almost in open play as well can be fantastic for Dublin, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. He's got a sweet strike of a ball. You know, that was evident from the point he got, but he's puck out as well. But, you know, I'd say your role in All-Stars now could be as controversial as that sin bin decision as the year goes on. You know, I'm sure there's always good crack there and people writing in who they'd have. And
we're never right anyway, Shane, that's for sure.
No. Right, yeah. But you're, look, you know, a broken clock is right twice a day, Mike, anyway. So, look, you have to be right sometimes, you know.
Quickly on Galway, right? Maurice, who was talking to in a few minutes, Galway man, I was texting him over the weekend, and he was like, his big worry for Galway is that they have a lot of great athletes in the team, but in a match like that where Dublin kind of like crowd you out, you kind of realize that they don't really have any runners, you know, and that would be a worry for them. And then I think as well, like, you know, is there any question over Shane O'Neill if Joe isn't right? And you have to play Joe Canning. I understand that he's there for his presence alone, but say if his thumb isn't right and his accuracy isn't right, should he be taken off freeze, for example, much earlier? Is that like a thing of like, is this Shane O'Neill's team or is it Joe Canning's team? And look, you know Joe a lot better than I do. I know, well, I don't think he's an ego man or anything like that. I wouldn't say it, but it still does take a manager to come in and say, here, pull you out of this a little bit. It's not your day, you know.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of people might realize Joe Canning made his debut in 2008. Like, you know, I mean, that's 14 seasons ago, like 13 years, but 14 seasons ago. And he had a lot of hurling done by the time he was 16, 17. Like, he was winning county finals for Portumna when he was 15, 16 years of age. So he has a lot done for him, like, you know. But I do agree with you, Mike. Yeah, I just feel, and I feel it was there in the Cork match a bit as well the other day, you know, that it just wasn't happening for Huggy, like, you know. And I'm a massive fan of Pat Horgan, and I think, you know, if you're on about building statues to people and all this, the Cork people should think about building one to him, because I think he has been, maybe when they haven't had great teams since he's got involved, he papers over the cracks a small bit with his individual performances. But he wasn't at the races the other day, and maybe, like, you know, there's no one player bigger than the team, and I suppose that's up to the manager to decide that. But yeah, look, I mean, if you have a free taker like Evan Ireland on the bench and it's just not happening for Joe, and I don't think Joe was fully right now with his injuries and everything, you know, I think you have to look at it and say, look, it's the team wins, everyone wins. It's not about anyone. And Joe Canning would be the first to say, if you want to put Evan Ireland in the freeze, absolutely. And I'm sure Pat Horgan would be the same, because he's all about the team. And you said it there, Mike. He's not about ego at all. Geez, if anyone could be about ego, it could be Joe. Like, but he's absolutely not. He's a top man. I lived with him in college in LIT. Lovely guy, down to earth, and he's all about Galway winning first and foremost. So if I'd say that, you know, if that decision had to be made, he'd have absolutely no problem with it. But as you said, it's a big call to make, isn't it? Like, you know. Yeah. Well, look, at Galway, if there's one team that could come back through, even despite the insane run, you would probably fancy Galway to do it, but not on the performance at the weekend. But taking nothing away from Dublin, the other game then is like madcap lunatic game. I saw there's a thing like the NFL do. There's an NFL guy on Twitter called Scorigami, I think, where it's like every time there's a result that's never happened before, he puts it up. I don't think there's such a service in hurling, but I'd imagine 237 to 229 has never happened in a hurling championship match before. But even after extra time, but like for me, Kilkenny, there's two things in this game. One is like
how they keep kind of developing lads like Owen Cody, or how Ballyhale do it, where they might like, this guy looks like he's another TJ, another Henry, you know, and it's unbelievable. Like, but the other thing is like Kilkenny, their ability to just go on runs in that game. Wexford kept getting 3-4 points ahead, and then Kilkenny would 5 minutes later be 2 up again, and they just do it through just grabbing the game a little bit for 10-minute periods or 5-minute periods, and obviously they did it eventually in the second half of extra time, and there was no coming back from it then, and that's why they won it. Like, but you always sorry, I'm rambling here a bit, but the assumption is sometimes with Kilkenny that's experience, but if you look around the team, it's not that experienced anymore. Like, Killian Buckley was on the bench, Fogarty was on the bench, Wally Walsh was on the bench. This is a young team, but Brian Cody, and it's almost inbuilt in them at this stage from birth, really, isn't it?
It's just, as I said, it like, no matter what Kilkenny team takes the field, and no matter what 15 lads pull on that black and amber jersey, you will find it hard to beat them, as you said, because their whole lives they're told you have to work hard, you have to win your own ball, and they just have that culture of just never giving in and never saying dying, and that's why they've won the most All-Ireland hurling titles of all time. Like, I mean, they just never ever know their bet, like, and they'll never ever give in. And as you said, 3-4 points down against Wexford at several times in the match. And even in the first half, they were 3 points down. They scored the next 4 points. They went 3 points down. They scored the next 4 points to take them in at half time, a point up. But like, they had 5 goal chances in the first half, Mike. And Owen Cody had one of them. Scored, finished up the game 1-5 play, hit the post, one of them. But like, I'm saying, goal chances is in. Mossy Cohan had a chance, give a ball off. And they had actually 5 clear goal chances where if they'd taken the right choice, they could have gone in 12, 13 points up, handy enough. But at the same time, to go in a point up after being 3 points down twice in the first half of hurling, because they never give in. To go back to the scoring thing for a second, Mike, like, the average before yesterday was before the weekend, 3 goals, 46 points a game. And we had 5 goals, and the old Mats now will kick in here, 66 points. 5 goals, 66 points in Kilkenny Wexford. But I have to mention, like, the Ballyhale contingent, you mentioned it there, right? TJ chips in with 16 points, Owen Cody 1-5 from play, Richie Reid 2 points from play, and Mullen a point from play. So 237, the small little place in Ballyhale contributes 124. Like, there's some going for one club, isn't it? Like, and as you said, they just keep rolling them out. Owen Cody's uncle wasn't a bad hurler now either. Now, a lot of people might know this. He's a lad called Henry Shefflin. So, he's from good stock there, and they say that an ounce of breeding is better than a ton of feeding, I think is another saying they use. But I thought that Kilkenny's bench was awesome there yesterday as well, Mike. From 7 subs they brought on, they scored 1-9. And I suppose in comparison to that, Wexford scored 1-1. And Mike, Wexford's game is running in its energy. And I just feel that the life got sucked out of them. And the lads that came on for them didn't contribute as much as the Kilkenny lads that came on. It's 1-9 versus 1-1 from your bench. And, they win the match then by 8 points. But like, the other thing for me was Owen Murphy's influence in the game, absolutely massive. And he tweeted about loving Hawkeye, and Kilkenny lads love Hawkeye, I think ever since 2014, since Bubbles Point didn't go over. But like, he tweeted saying, no, love Hawkeye. And you love to see that human side of him as well. I know Owen Murphy from lads went to college, and he's great crack, loves the crack, and it's nice to see the human side of him. But the save he makes, and I think the game is 135 maybe to 229, and Billy Ryan goes up and gets a point, and that's a 4-point turnaround from Rory O'Connor nearly getting a goal to going up the field getting a point. Wally Walsh gets the goal in the 86th minute. Sure, that's it. It's game over then after that. But I just thought their bench was unbelievable there yesterday. And I'll talk about Hawkeye. Like, if Hawkeye isn't there, Mike, does Liam Ryan's point not be given as a point? Is Conor McDonald's goal stands and Wexford win the game by 2 points? It's all ifs and buts, but you know what? Such an exciting game of hurling. And as we said, 5 goals and 66 points, unbelievable stuff. Like, it was great to see over the weekend that exciting hurling. And remember that period of play I think was highlighted for it a minute and a half. That was unbelievable stuff. Brilliant to see it. Like, hope we see lots more of it now over the next few weeks.
Yeah, some drama. There was a moment actually. It's funny after Walsh's goal that kind of won the game for Kilkenny. Kilkenny got a point straight after, and there was a roar from the crowd, and it's so quiet because there was only 8,000 people. But I was thinking to myself, it's like, no matter how many years they had to do the buttons for the fake noise, they'd never be able to get the specific crowd noises of matches that you go to. That was a crowd of, Jesus, we got out of jail there. We're going to win this game, and now we're running it up a little bit. And it's almost, there's 4 layers to what that exact sound was. And I heard it, and I was like, Jesus, great to have crowds back at matches, isn't it? But
you think about only 2,000 from each county as well. You know what
yeah,
I mean? Imagine
yeah.
if we had 8,000. I heard rumours that maybe the Munster final might go to 10,000, Mike.
Oh wow,
that would be unbelievable. That'd be brilliant. Please God, you know. So imagine if you had another 5,000 or 6,000 Wexford people there roaring at the end of that match. Because I remember the Wexford crowd in 2019, they were loud, so they were great fans.
Well, the Munster final that might have 10,000 will be Tip and Limerick again. You know, I thought that it was a point. I was thinking last night when I was watching the interviews from Kingston and from Kiley, that it shows how far Limerick have come, that they win a Munster semi-final against Cork by 8 points, and Cork are talking about how they were pleased with how they played, and Limerick are, you know, they're a little bit disappointed, I thought. And it's just like, Jesus Christ! In the last 5 years, Limerick hurling have they ever beaten Cork by 8 points in a semi-final and not been absolutely ecstatic about it? Do you know what I mean? In their history, it shows how far they've come, doesn't it?
It shows how far they've come. But I think just to touch on the Cork thing for a second, right? Cork lost against Waterford last year in the Munster Championship, and it was the most lifeless, energyless, like passion. There was no passion there from the Cork lads, and the way they lost on Saturday, the performance was much better and still lost by 8 points. Like, they're a young team. I think they have 10 lads around under the age of 24, the Cork lads. But it's the way, like, they actually outscored Limerick on the hooks and blocks. So they worked savagely hard. And I thought at the back, like, Sean O'Donoghue was immense. Kept Aaron Gillane scoreless from play. Do you know what I mean? Like, and we talk about Sean Finn, the other side as well. Like, the two of them, two top class cornerbacks. But Cork worked really hard. The killing thing for him was this. They never closed that gap to a goal, and they had loads of chances to do it. And, you know, even in the final quarter, they just weren't clinical enough. They had 5 wides. You know, Owen Cadigan's one probably stands out where he's all on his own. That would have brought it back to 3. And then you're thinking, if they get a goal. But I suppose Pat Horgan's influence, we just didn't see it. No score from play, and didn't score at all in the final quarter. And, you know, it was a killer for them. Whereas, you know, Darragh Fitzgibbon was very good, 3 points from play. Jack O'Connor, I thought, was really good, 3 points from play. Shane Barrett, really good, and he came on, 2 points from play. Jerome Millerick worked ferociously hard for the team as well. And as we said, as I mentioned, Sean O'Donoghue at the back. So there was lots of positives to take from. But here we are talking about Cork and how good they were. Yeah. Limerick weren't even that good, right? If I said to you before the match, Aaron Gillane won't score from play, Tom Morrissey won't score from play. All right? Garrod Hegarty won't have one of his best days, gets taken off. And they still win the match by 8 points. But, like, I mean, it's a sign of a true championship team, Mike, isn't it, like that? Yeah. When Peter Casey gets the sin bin, it's 1-5 to 6 points. And Limerick outscore. Limerick did to Cork what Tip did to Clare, but they were minus the man. They outscored them 2-4 to 2 points. And I just think it's a sign of the team. They're getting the guys on the ball that they want to get in the ball. Like Keane Lynch, Garrod Hegarty. These guys are getting top possessions in the game, and it's no fluke because Limerick want them on the ball. Whereas for Cork, you know, the Sean O'Donoghue was one of the top possessions. And when their cornerback is one of the top possessions, it's probably not a good sign for the rest of the team. But Limerick know exactly who they want on the ball, and they know exactly who they want on the ball for the opposition as well. But it was to get that 2-4 while Peter Casey was gone. Yeah. It was a killer. And a very, very unlucky goal. Sean O'Donoghue, the deflection, he did everything right, but the deflection of Darragh Donovan. Kyle Hayes' run not being tracked from wing back. The ball was bombed down from a puck out. He runs on, takes a chance, isn't tracked. Lovely pass by Gillane. And that to cut in off his right and finish it. Like, people forget, like, that Limerick have 3 top-class forwards in their backs. Kyle Hayes, man of the match, All-Ireland final centre forward. Declan Hannon played a lot of his career in the forwards. Barry Nash getting man of the match underage for Limerick in the forwards. So they have guys who are comfortable on the ball and know the type of ball that the forwards want as well. And that was evident from Kyle Hayes yesterday. Not a lot of wing backs would be up there comfortable to cut in off the right. They'd be happy to take the point. I'd be happy to take the point as a midfielder, Mike. But he cut in, buried it below. And I think Limerick lads I think it's worrying for the rest of us that they won a Munster semi-final by 8 points and they didn't play that well. Like, it's, you know, it's
and that's it. Because there's like, Tip will look at the league and this game and see opportunities, you know, and that's the question then, is Limerick have a lot of improving to do, but even when not at their best. They're at that level now of a hurling team who can, we're talking about Kilkenny, we talk about Dublin and football or whatever, who can win matches, you know, and that's match play is as big a deal as performance level and skill levels and everything like that, you know. So, you know, but Tip are, again, the most experienced team they're going to come up against this year.
Yeah. Look, there will be. Look, and I tell you, look, Mike, where I'm living here, Ballynahinch, we're actually very close to Newport, and Newport is basically a suburb now of Limerick. You know, half the people living in Newport would actually be Limerick people, you know, and even in the school below, I know we have County Colours Day there in the school. You know, we 3 or 4 kids in my class have Limerick jerseys on. So there is a fierce rivalry where we are here, you know, with us in the Limerick lads. But it's, you know, it's a good, healthy rivalry. But Limerick have had our number now for some time. Like, they gave us a fair beating down at Park Cleave last year. In the last Munster final played in 2019, they beat us by 12 points, I think it was. So Liam Sheehy will be getting these boys ready to go to war, absolute war against Limerick in the Munster final in 2 weeks. And I'm sure John Kiley will be the exact same. You know, there's never any question of passion or anything when it comes to tipping Limerick matches. And, you know, the Munster Cup now is called the Mick Mackey Cup. And, you know, I'm like, what another added incentive for Limerick, you know, with the hand boys involved in Mick Mackey and everything he did for Limerick hurling and for a hand, for them to bring back the Mick Mackey Cup. For the first time, it's been called the Mick Mackey Cup. I do believe. So, you know, it's just so many things. Just quickly, John. I know. Or sorry, Mike. We're flat out talking. The trust that John Kiley has in his players is unbelievable. He had 5 lads in yellow cards, right? And I was listening to him talking afterwards, and he said in the second half, one of the key things, we had 5 guys in yellow cards going into it, but we trusted those guys and we didn't take them off. We trusted them in their tackling, and we didn't pick up another yellow in the second half, which was really a telling factor. Like, he's massive trust in them guys. Like, Diarmaid Burns is on a yellow, and in the half-back position, you can easily get another one, and you'll be gone then. But I tell you, like, in the second half, I think Limerick only gave away, it was something like 6 or 7 frees. And that was the trust, and that's the culture they have there. And they're a serious group. Their bench came on and made a difference again. And as I said, win a Munster semi-final by 8 points, not playing well. It's worrying for the rest of us, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we go, Limerick for Liam once. So I don't know who he is or who he supports, but he felt the Limerick, the Peter Casey sin bin was harsh. What do you think of the decision? I just like, there is an element though of like the Fifes one for Waterford, this one probably the wrong decision, but one of those understandable wrong decisions where the ref didn't, like, if he gives the free, he has to give the yellow card almost, you know. Whereas it's very different than the Ed McCarthy one.
Yeah, that's it. It was inside the D. I suppose it's careless use of the hurley as well, wasn't it? He came in over the top with the hurley. You know, I suppose people are saying, was it a clear goal scoring chance? Which is this. Look, we could be here all day talking about it. Mike. It is, as I said. I think what Fergal Horgan said early in the year is, it is really a matter of opinion, and it is down to the ref. But I think what people would like to see is, right, if the ref's not sure, if he makes a decision, fine, but maybe have a chat with the other 8 officials around. I'm talking about 4th officials, umpires either end, you know, linesmen, whoever can see it, whoever might have seen it, seen a clear view of it. It is down to a matter of opinion of the refs. The refs will have talk about this in depth. I suppose to answer the question, do I think that the sin bin was harsh? I don't think it was harsh, because I think that it was a matter of opinion of the ref, and the ref felt that he was inside the D, it was careless use of the hurley. So going by the rule book and the matter of that particular ref, I think it was a sin bin by letter of law. But great save by Nicky Quaid. But I suppose, like Ava Quilligan, it going the wrong side of him for Shamey. Pat Horgan did put it to the right side of Nicky Quaid. Which is, who am I to tell Pat Horgan how to take penalties? I barely scoring out in the back garden here.
Shane, listen, we've got much longer than producers shouting in my ear here, but at the same time, I don't think a weekend like that could afford a minute less than it. But thanks a million for brilliant analysis all the way through. So we'll give you the week off. We'll talk a bit of football next week, and we'll catch up with you for the finals in a couple of weeks.
Great stuff. Thanks, Mike. All the best.
Thanks a million, Shane. Don't forget, if you enjoyed that chat, please do subscribe to the channel. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the podcast. If you're listening to the show back, so please do hit the subscribe button, and we'll be here with you every Monday with Shane. Unbelievable analysis there from Shane, and of course with Darren O'Sullivan when we're talking football. He'll be back with us next week. Right now, though, we're going to speak to Maurice Brosnan. We're going to get inside the game and talk a little bit about his GAA Embedded article from last week. Okay, delighted to say that as part of our GAA Embedded show, we are going to have Balls alumnus Maurice Brosnan with us every weekend, but no longer full-time with Balls, Maurice, but now just spending 20 to 40 hours of watching live GAA in Melbourne every week. That's basically how you've kind of spent your couple of years out of the country.
Yeah, this will be a weekly check-in with a very sleep-deprived me. But very excited, especially after the weekend. If the weekend stay like this, I'll very much be happy to sacrifice sleep.
Definitely, absolutely. And Maurice has been doing a GAA Embedded article for us every week, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. We'll talk about this week's one, find out what next week's one's going to be, and that's going to be part of the show as we go on. But Maurice, I do want to talk to you. We've just spent a lot of time, and God, there was a lot to talk about with Shane McGrath. But there was a lot of football on this weekend as well. I mean, we'll have Darren on next week, obviously, but I don't want to kind of overlook it. Your own County Galway. I don't know what to make of this game, because there's a lot of kind of negative talk. I see Galway fans aren't too happy with how they played, and I'm just thinking, like, they went to Hyde Park and won a Connacht semi-final. Like, there's, if you think of it, there's 3 teams in Connacht, any of them can beat any of them on any day. I'd be happy enough, like.
Yeah, not for the first time, Mick. I agree with you 100%. I don't understand really the negativity around this game in general, to be honest. Like, the conditions were absolutely dire.
Bad, yeah.
I think the risks of a knockout championship, we can complain about a knockout championship, what it does to weaker counties, the fact that they don't get a second chance, they don't get a chance to progress. But equally, it puts so much pressure on the stronger counties, the middle tier counties, that in a do or die situation, I can fully appreciate why the temptation to revert to a degree of conservatism is so strong. So, now it's in saying that, I mean, I think there's kind of 2 parallels coming out of this game. There's certain people who are talking about Roscommon and how defensive they set up, which, to a certain extent, I can kind of see their perspective, and they, think Roscommon were fully entitled to set up how they did. And, and the other people then are thinking, why did Roscommon come out and play like this? And, if they come out and had a rattle off them, at very least they could put up their own cord. And to be honest, I kind of fall down in the middle of it, really. I think that, Roscommon are fully entitled to set up as defensively as they are. I think they're very well drilled defensively. But the idea that we talk about these conversations in isolation as if it's NFL and you're talking about defense on one side and attack on the other side is kind of nonsense, to be honest. And I think it's very clear, you can look at teams who are very well coached, and Roscommon are extremely well coached defensively. They have a really solid setup. I would think that's fully deserving of praise. But equally, it is very clear that inhibits their attacking ability and their attacking game plan, actually. So, you come into this game, somebody like Conor Cox, who is a star corner forward. Now, Conor Cox, his conversion before this game is 40%, which, that's not good enough. That's shooting from 20 years ago, to be honest. And his wides, on Sunday epitomised that. They were even worse. And the reason that Conor Cox's wides are so bad is because, that's either evidence of, 1, a guy going against the game plan, or 2, not enough time spent developing an attacking strategy on training ground. Now that's fully understandable. This is a compromised year. We've a really shortened preseason. A league campaign like Roscommon, the league campaign was very important for them because they, Division 1 was their priority. But equally, it's very clear that wasn't something that they had developed, and that robbed them. You've got a guy that was not in isolation. That their shooting as a whole, decision making going forward was really poor. And if you were to, this is very simplistic analysis, but if you were to compare and contrast, Galway. I don't know if Galway were that more offensive, to be honest. But what Galway did do really, really well was, they took their chances extremely well. They got runners up the field. They've got a really good balance. I really like the balance of this Galway team. Galway are a young team. I don't know if that's appreciated enough. Damien Comer and Shane Walsh are 27, 28. They should be in their prime. And in reality, they're the leaders of this team. That you're looking to them to be the experienced heads, because you look down the spine of the team. Well, Kearns is not there that long. Dylan McHugh is only there very recently. The player who would be there is John Daly, again, who's very young. Matthew Tierney is making a championship debut. Paul Conroy is probably a guy looking for a leader. Peter Cook, 2019, we're all excited about him. He goes away for 2020. He's just back in there, so there's no continuity there. So you need those players to kind of come together. And that's why, there could be some bad days coming for Galway as well. But overall, I actually do like the direction they're going for. I like the balance in the team. I like their athletic ability. They're young in terms of, Park Joyce, what he's doing in Galway, I really like. He's got a feeder squad, he calls it, which is where he's kind of, this is a good way to try and develop a pathway to introduce the under-20s. They're really successful in the 20s from last year. This current crop look pretty good too. So those players can knock around there in this feeder squad. They feel a part of it. They're not, disenfranchised from the senior team. At the same time, Galway are also missing Michael Daly, it was a big loss. Killy McDade back from Australia, he's out injured. John Daly, as I mentioned previously, Tom Flynn is injured. The biggest loss of anybody, I think the biggest loss to this year's championship is one team that desperately needs a player back, it's Galway and Ian Burke, because if they had him as an outball option inside as something different, I think it would revolutionise it. But overall, like I enjoyed the game, to be honest. I didn't think it was that bad. It was hardy, it was honest. That there was a bit of bite to it, which is good to see. Some of the tackles that went in, Kieran Malloy got United put back, kept driving on. Peter Cook had the jersey ripped off him. That kind of stuff was good to see. It's entertaining. So I thought it was a good game and a good win for Galway.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I think there's a question I would say that we could probably get into another time when we maybe see another team or two do it, of whether the defensive, maybe some things are right for the game, but could Roscommon, if they won, play a different way against Mayo? And maybe, as we talked about to Darren last week, maybe these things are passé, and if you want to get to the next level, you do need to have, maybe attacking is the style of play that's predominantly used by the big teams at the moment for a reason, and that you can only get to a certain level. Maybe you can stop Galway, but they did lose the match. And I do think that's worthy of a discussion maybe another time. But I would agree with you on the positivity of Galway. And I actually think that the young team thing definitely isn't talked about enough. There was times yesterday where I was kind of looking up guys, trying to remember where they were from, or what team they come from, or what age they were, and that's because we only saw Galway once last year in the kind of final after they got the bye, and so on and so forth. But you mentioned Matthew Tierney making his debut there. We'll talk about a more recent article you did on Balls.ie in a minute, but you wrote a brilliant piece a couple of years ago for Balls on Matthew Tierney playing for, I think, the under-20s then, and his father Matt, who'd had a tragic accident back in 1988. And just the full circle of it all. And he was superb yesterday and looks like a real player now. And that kind of story is prominent again, I suppose.
Yeah, and that's the favourite interview I've done, ever for writing. It's a piece that's kind of stayed with me. I remember actually messaging her after the interview, and just the sheer, it was the kind of guy, there was nothing. I'm out here in Melbourne at the minute. There was nothing I would love more to be sitting at home with a pint of Guinness, sitting down with Matthew Tierney and chatting football for hours upon hours, because he's just that type of fella from when I went to meet him in Galway. Firstly, young Matthew, to make your championship debut and be as impressive as he was phenomenal. I don't know if you can appreciate it enough. Also, his versatility, this is a guy he's feeling ball impeccably well. Defensively, he's chasing back Enda Smith. He's contributing going forward. He takes over the frees. On a championship debut in those conditions, to take over the frees and be as cool as he was is kind of phenomenal. And then, the whole story, his father, who, this was 2018, I think, NUIG got to the Sigerson Cup final. 30 years previously, his father played for, at the time, University College Galway, was their best player, in full forward. They lost their Cork team that had Maurice Fitzgerald. That was unfortunate. That was his last game. He was involved in a car accident after that game. And just, the sheer, I remember one thing he said to me was that he was so proud of his sons, and not only how they play football, the way that they conduct themselves. And I think Matthew kind of epitomizes that. He's a brutally honest, hard-working player with absolute class. You could play him. He's one of those players, and it's a new generation. We talked about this previously with kind of Michael Murphy. Kieran Kilkenny is another one. You could probably play him in any line of the field if you want, and he would sell there. Even when he was tired, he was in the edge of the square, and he's a huge threat. And then just the whole story. I love that story. His older brother, when I grew up in Galway, we had a big rivalry, Barna and Uachtar. It would have been like the underage rivalry. I remember a couple of years ago, and we played an underage final, West Sport under 14 maybe final, and it went to extra time. And Bosco McDermott, John McDermott, the famous Bosco McDermott's son, Bosco, who won multiple All-Irelands for Galway, came out onto the pitch and stopped the game. He was our coach and said, "What are we doing here? These lads are 14, they're going at it hard. This is a brilliant game. Why don't we share the cup?" And we did. We shared the trophy in an underage. So, and that Uachtar team, the bulk of that team is the great Uachtar team that got to an intermediate final last year. The two Tierneys, Matthew's older brother Enda was around the Galway squad as well. He played for that NUIG team that got to the Sigerson final. They also had a couple of star forwards, the Lees. And, but just, it is. I think it's probably the story of the summer, to be honest, because just to see how well it's worked out, it's kind of for it to come full circle as it has. And that's, I wouldn't wish anything but the best for him and for his family.
Definitely. We'll tweet out a link. I think that was 2018 you did that piece. We'll tweet out a link straight away, actually, if you're watching this now, and we'll put it out again later. You should definitely all have a read of that interview with Matt Tierney Sr. From a couple of years ago that Maurice did. Maurice, we're nearly out of time. I want to get to the hand signals. I really do. But Armagh and Monaghan both look pretty decent, especially Monaghan, I would say, in Ulster. Kildare and Westmeath should actually be a pretty good Leinster semi-final in the most interesting province to get to if you're on one side of it, to get to a final. But here's the thing, me people are getting excited because they hammered the shine out of Longford. They weren't expecting to. And Dublin were brutal against Wexford, and everybody's talking about how it's all about Stephen Cluxton, and if he goes, he goes. I did see Vinnie Murphy actually tweeting saying that, like, you know, people don't actually realise how big an impact this is going to be. Dublin have already lost a few leaders and a few kind of like big players over the last couple of years. You know, you lose Jack McCaffrey, Paul Mannion, whoever it might be, over, like, you know, any team is going to be affected by losing, you know, players like that. And if you lose possibly the most important Gaelic football player of all time on top of that, eventually something is going to give. But, you know, let's nip the Meath optimism and the buzz straight away first.
Yeah, well, you know, but like that's not a point I've thought about before, you know, about Dublin. But if you think about it, you know, like the whole thing about Dublin, this fame last year, Brian Howard and Paul Mannion, how could they possibly have them on the bench? But you know, and this is the reinforcements, the constant introducing reformers that they're so good at. And then, you know, they lose like Small, who's, you know, the starting centre back. That doesn't seem like too big a loss. And then Keane O'Sullivan retires because of his hamstring issues. And suddenly, you know, Brian Howard has to plug a gap there. And I just think, you know, the level of intelligence that those players bring, and Cluxton epitomizes it. I remember we did a podcast after the 2019 drawn final, Dublin and Kerry, and myself and yourself were absolutely amazed at Cluxton's intelligence. To, you know, it was something that it's like a thing you would say in theory it sounds great, but you never ever see it in practice. And Cluxton pushes up, you know, the Dublin are down to 14 players. Johnny Cooper has been sent off, and all Cluxton does is push up a line, and he marks Tommy Walsh, and he allows Dublin push up every single line. So you're looking at this game and you're thinking, where is the overlap? Why can't Kerry get space here? And the fact is they can't, because Stephen Cluxton set the tempo by coming out of his goals, by marking Tommy Walsh. And, you know, that's a kind of in-game intelligence. We're going to talk about this later, actually. That's in-game intelligence you can't buy. And you're not going to generate that in training in a season or in 2 seasons. That is, you know, this is a guy who's been at the elite, the peak of his game for 10 seasons, bringing that to action. That wasn't that long ago. You remove that from the team. And it's a chink in the armour. I don't think it's a big enough chink for me to get at them, but I do think it definitely weakens them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll see how that goes. Look, it was a more interesting weekend of football than I think will be naturally given credit because of how insane the hurling was. But that's the 2021 championship, I think, you know, and we'll have opposite weeks as well. I think where football grabs the imagination, but it's all set up now. I think that for you know, I think there's 14 teams out already, you know, which is insane. But a lot of the good teams are still there. Wanted to talk to you about this GAA Embedded article you did for us last week, your first one of the season. There's going to be plenty of them. You wrote about hand signals in Gaelic football. And I suppose we're talking about, you know, a bit of a grey area of analysis over the years still, where everything else is so hyper done. But I think maybe one that's maybe easier found out about and countered, I suppose, than people would think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, you know, you're right to say it's a grey area, because there's no, like, what's your metric to measure hand signals, you know, or on-field communication? There is none. You know, it's a totally ambiguous area. One of the examples I gave in the piece was NFL analysts talking about what is the one thing that statistics can't measure? And Warren Sharp does a bunch of stuff for a lot of teams actually in the NFL, said, you know, it's on-field communication, it's audibles, it's reactions to certain screens. The example, I mean, you know this yourself, the perfect example is Tom Brady, like his ability to read defensive line and pick a gap. And, you know, that's just, it is intangible, but at the same time, it's also, you can analyze it. And, you know, like, I don't think hand signals there's nothing new there. You know, this is going back to the 80s where, you know, the Kerry had stuff where their goalkeepers bending down to tie laces, or, you know, I remember I did a piece a couple of years ago about Dave Fitzgerald when he started out in the Fitzgibbon, and he'd have a water bottle and a cap in his hand, and depending on which one he held up, the goalkeeper was the puck at either side. You know, this is old hat stuff. But I kind of think that we're going to see it less and less because of coaching, because the improvement in coaching. And I actually think that's important because, you know, one of the examples in the piece I gave is Clare, the Clare footballers, who had a pretty telltale sign where they were holding, you know, goalkeeper holds his right hand up, he's going deep left hand up, deep right. So either he picks a short one, if the short one is a non, he's holding his hand up, he's holding right hand up, and that ball was going deep to the left hand side. And the problem was that Aidan O'Shea in the league semi-final was all over that. He broke it down within 5 minutes because, you know, in-game intelligence is so important. And that's why, you know, I think the best frameworks aren't actually signals really, or they're one-off signals, you know. So the best frameworks are giving a goalkeeper like a couple of different options. What Clare did against Kerry, which was actually statistically more successful, was just a really simple bunch and break. Your 6 defenders come together in the middle, they break, shoot off in either side. The goalkeeper, then you trust the goalkeeper to pick out the best option, and, you know, that gives him an option. So there's a bit of guidance there, there's a bit of overarching structure, but it's not, you know, this handed down this mandate, you do this is the call, you do this. And because the problem with that is that in an era of incredible analysis, all these camera angles, the backroom teams, just, you know, bigger than squads, that's easily broken down, and it might last once or twice. You know, Dublin have used, by the way, that's one of the examples in the piece. Dublin used hand signals in the past, but ultimately, I don't think it's something that you can guarantee long-term success with. And what, you know, does guarantee long-term success is developing tactical flexibility, in-game intelligence. We just spoke about Cluxton as the case example. Dublin actually had the best example, and that's, you know, ultimately where, if you're from a coaching perspective, you need to get to.
Yeah, so we're probably at the stage now where, and I was going to mention this with that Dublin one that you mentioned, where one of the players puts up the X to sort of say this free is going in long. You can see it there, yeah. But like, is there as much in that as in, like, you know, we're not actually trying to fool the opposition. It's just that I can't shout that far and them hear me with 80,000 people in Croke Park, and I just need to let them know. But you're basically going, go long. I've often wondered, you know, in football, in soccer, like where, you know, the player will put up his hand before he whacks a corner into the box.
Corners,
it's the universal symbol. It's like, who are you doing it for? And maybe it's just like, maybe sometimes we don't have to think, they're not coded. They don't have to be a secret.
Yeah.
I just need the centre forward to know that this ball is coming into him. It doesn't matter if the defender also knows it.
Exactly. That's, you know, and that's what you said there about the influence of the crowd is a really good point as well, because I've noticed in this year's championship, signals don't happen as much, but because there was the absence of crowds, you know, we have footage now, and I would much rather watch games without commentary, not because commentary is bad, but just because you pick up on small little things. And now you've gonna get audibles calls. You know, if anybody watched Roscommon Galway game yesterday, you would have heard the sideline shouting 300, 300. Now, like, I have my own theories about what that is, but I'm not fully sure. Not enough to risk it here anyway. But you know, that kind of stuff. So, you know, 44 was a really common one that, you know, 5 years ago, everybody was calling 44, and that's just, you know, self-explanatory. You ask anybody, and that's the line that players need to get to, just inside the 45. 1+ is another one you hear kind of it's a fairly common one. You know, red was one that you heard a long time ago, which was long ball inside. You heard that a lot during last year's championship, actually. And, you know, that you just made the case there about the X. The X is just red, but non-verbal. It's just a way of doing it in Croke Park, where the full forward line probably aren't going to hear you. So, and, you know, it's like, I think in that circumstance, it's actually, I wouldn't, you wouldn't be that critical of it. It has a place, I guess, you know, but, you know, you're not basing a full game plan around that. Like, Dublin's, you know, game plan is this, you know, would you call it game plan A, or is it B, C, D, E, F, G? You know, it's hard to actually pin down any of that. It's just, you know, a little gimmick that can add to it. So it still has a certain amount of place, but I definitely don't think, you know, from a kick-out perspective, from a attacking perspective, you should wrap your whole game plan around it.
Okay, so we're probably not going in. So your thing is like, it has its place, but it's not going to be. It's not something that we're going to see more and more of. If anything, it's going to be less and less. We're not going to see double reverse jinx, bluffs, you know, where the defenders or the midfielders are supposed to understand which one is false and which one is a false flag and which one isn't for every goalkeeper kick out. We're not getting to that point. Hopefully.
No, and yeah, well, yeah, fingers crossed. And also, Mick, it goes back to what we were saying about Roscommon earlier, and your points. You know, the whole point is, you know, Roscommon can spend all his time developing a defensive game plan, or you can spend a load of time on the training ground developing really efficient signals that the opposition can't break down. But you need to try to think about your resources and how you spread your time efficiently. And are you best served? Like, is that going to win you a game if you spend, you know, an hour of every hour and a half session just working on your defense, or an hour of every hour and a half session just working on these signals for a kick-out strategy? Or would you be better served in investing, you know, that hour in absolutely nailing your basic skills, you know, catch, kick, pass, getting that absolutely perfect, and then allowing, you know, developing intelligent players, you know, good decision makers and skill execution at a really high level. And that might stand to you a lot more from a long-term perspective than, you know, how you dedicate your time. You know, this, as you said, you know, Roscommon can spend all that time getting what was a really impressive defensive strategy in place. But where does it get you? You know, if you spend all this time, you know, I could easily, you know, it doesn't take that long for a coach on a training session. We've all had them who would spend, you know, an hour and a half a couple of times a week just on one signals, but it doesn't get you anywhere. You know, you need to think about your resources and what the efficient use of your time in coaching. And I think from Dublin, you know, are the case example of that. You know, for all we'll talk about signals, the stuff they do really, really well are their basics.
Okay, well, the piece is well worth a read. It's Maurice's first GAA Embedded article. He's had a few more. We just haven't called it that, but you can go back and read it anyway on the site. And what have you got in store for us this week? We'll chat to you about it next week.
I'm thinking about something along that idea of how teams execute their basics and how integral it actually is to games. You know, you can see, like, you know, teams will somebody would burst himself, put so much effort into making a full field run. They'll get a 3v2 overlap, and a bad hand pass loops too wide, and it kills, a really good goal chance. From a tackle perspective, you get players who, 40, 50 minutes in, lazy tackles, and that's not down to fitness. That's just down to, basic executions. And it's a cliche, and people kind of roll their eyes when you say, the thing that separates Dublin apart is that they are so good at their basics. But it's a cliche because it's true. Dublin, the use of their hand pass, for example, their kicking ability, and that's, that was, if there was any red flag from the game yesterday, that's the stuff that would worry about Dublin. Their execution of basics was pretty poor. Now that could just be down to, I'd say they're peaking for probably another month's time, and maybe that was inflated their thinking yesterday. But I think something along those lines.
Okay, well, great stuff. We'll look forward to that. Keep an eye on Balls.ie for that one over the course of the week. Just trying to get you sort of embedded, to borrow the word, in sort of the GAA tactics, and just look at it a little bit deeper than we have for those of us who maybe watch the game on a more superficial and surface level than Maurice does. We like to get, so we can have something to talk about, pretend we know a little bit more than we do. Before I let you go, Maurice, right, one of the things that was, that was very close to your heart during your time with Balls.ie was the Rolling All-Stars, something that we're doing with PwC this year again for their 50th anniversary of the All-Stars this year. We'll be launching it this week. Hurling and football, we'll be running it all the way through the year. The idea, of course, being that we pick an All-Star team after every round of the championship, and therefore kind of don't forget the early round. Somebody has to do something to get somebody out of. Somebody has to have more consistent performances to get somebody out of the team. There is a team there that's already picked that, you hold on to the shirt, if you will, so that it's not all picked in, the middle of September or whatever it is, when everybody only remembers the final. You used to have a lot of impact on this. We're all struggling without you. We're having conversations all weekend. Nobody knows. The hurling especially is like there could be 60 lads already in this team, and there's only about 6 or 7 viable teams, which is shows you the standard. If I was to give you one player veto, or not veto, but the kind of the defining vote on both hurling and football, who must be in the Rolling All-Stars week 1 starting tomorrow?
Yes, that's a really good question, and I think the important thing to note for people who aren't familiar with this concept is that this isn't a All-Stars predictions. This isn't, you're looking at somebody like David Clifford, who was very good against Clare, and you think, oh, well, he's definitely going to get an All-Star. This is, if you were to give the weighted performance that we've seen so far this year, who should be in it. And with that in mind, there are players, there are obvious ones that I could opt for here and say he has to be in it. But the one for me for football anyway is Cian Farrell from Offaly, the full forwards from Derry. He scored 8 points yesterday against Clare, scored 7 points week 4 against Louth, at 21-year-olds. People might be familiar with, he was earmarked very early on as an up-and-coming young player, and then he was actually amazing in the Citizen Cup last year for Carlow IT, but after the final he had that freak injury where he stood on glass and needed surgery and was out for the year. Comes back in this year, and I just, we talked earlier about honest but talented players, and he just epitomizes that for me. I actually think for anybody who saw the Clare game yesterday, the very first 8 minutes in, the ball goes in long. Mark Dempsey he's not facing the ball, he's pulling at Cian Farrell, and if Cian Farrell goes down there, that's a black card. It's a stonewall black card. He's on the edge of there's no other defender there. But he doesn't. He tries to stay on his feet and he kicks the ball wide after being fouled, and he doesn't even get a free, which says its own self. But if anybody hasn't seen, if you're not familiar with Cian Farrell, just go and watch I think it was his first score from play just before the water break, left-footed points, the dummy left, which was out of this world, comes back in straight on his laces, puts the ball over the bar. There's a big fight in the sideline just before the water break. Then he wants nothing to do with it, goes over, gets his ball, comes back and finishes with 8 points. So yeah, I think Cian Farrell, based off the last 2 games for Offaly, he's Offaly got a lot of praise for their style, but they do get numbers back as well, and sometimes he's the lone player up there, a lone out ball, and that can be a difficult place to do. But I thought he gave Dempsey a real tough day yesterday, and from just both games, by the way, because obviously how he played against Louth as well. I think definitely from an Offaly perspective, Cian Farrell, and from hurling,
choice.
Yeah. From hurling, on this team of maybe underrated players, a player that the thing is, there's been a lot of discomfort about the way hurling is going right now, and I think what do we want from hurling? We want hardy, exciting hurling, and a hurler, and I'm sure Mick, you will agree with this, who epitomises that for me over the last 2 games is Cathal Malone from Clare. I just think from a work rate perspective, he's absolutely integral to the way Clare want to play, because you know, it does not have somebody who's up the field and working back the way Cathal Malone does. He carries the trek going forward the other way as well, which is really important. And, you know, that seems like something that is basic. And then you look around just at the championship right now, and, you know, Garrett Hegarty probably get yesterday a point or maybe two from play. This has been a long-standing issue for Tipperary, that they don't get enough out of their working half-forward line, even though, you know, to a certain extent their midfield. So, like, what Cathal Malone does from a Clare perspective, I think is brilliant. I think his work rate it gives Clare so much. I think that stuff can, you know, it might go unappreciated after after a weekend that we just saw, and, you know, we've TJ Reid doing what he does, and, you know, players shooting the lights out, and, you know, Tony Kelly skirting on the fringes of the game, and yesterday is 1-1 for half time, which is all very, very impressive. But I think, you know, from giving you 90% exactly what you want, hard work, you know, pure and utter work rate, just absolutely doggedness. Cathal Malone epitomises that for me. And, you know, I think that the whole point of the rolling out is kind of rewarding that sort of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, look, I mean, I spoke to Shane about that kind of player when we spoke last week's show, and Cathal Malone and Dan McCormick were the two players that we mentioned. And Dan McCormick got man of the match yesterday, and Cathal Malone in your rolling all-stars team. I have to say though, like, you know, that's a classic Maurice pick, because my two veto picks or whatever would be Sean O'Shea and Danny Sutcliffe, which is a little bit more marquee forwards.
Sure, classic hipster picks. Yeah.
Room for all these types of players on the team. Maurice, thanks a million for joining us. We'll chat to you next week. I think we'll probably be talking a little bit more hurling to make up for the football talk that we'll be doing with Darren O'Sullivan next week. But thanks for joining us, and everybody keep an eye out on Balls.ie for Maurice's article this week.
Cheers, Mick.
Still to come on the show, we've got PJ and Gary standing by to play Guess the Handicaps. But right now, we're going to have a look at one of our kind of deep dives into the GAA world in a non-timely fashion. Last week, our man Finch brought you through the best away jerseys of the 2021 season. But we're going way more timeless now. We're going to look at some of the greatest GAA haircuts of all time. Important business.
Haircuts are a sacred thing in the GAA. Obviously, we all know about the fabled championship haircut, but sometimes lads can get a bit outlandish with it. So, we thought you'd run you through the 7 best GAA haircuts of all time. Let's get right to it. There's truly nothing more mid-2000s than utilising a poor bleach job. Yeah, when you add it to an off-kilter mohawk, that just makes it even more 2005, and Scott Conroy did that. When Ger Oakley started off his hairdressing odyssey, he had a full beard before he chopped that thing off and realised that sideburns were the way to go for him. He finally got to his destination. He just took the circuitous route to get it, and I respect him. That's right, folks, we're back to bottle of bleach blonde jobs here, and who could forget Mark Vaughan? The Dublin man really wanted to mask the fact that he was actually ginger, and he applied as much bleach as you would to a murder scene on top of his head. Boom, 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 and let me hear you say short back and sides. Short back and sides. Jason Sherlock was the poster boy of the GAA in the mid-90s, and with a haircut that he could set his watch to, that just made it all better. Fair play to you, Jason. There's just something so beautiful about Tom Parsons' natural curly mop. They're so stoic yet springy. They're the envy of my eye, and indeed anybody who watched Tom Parsons play. You wouldn't be surprised if the people of Donegal would consider Jim McGuinness a messiah for what he did as manager of the county. Yet, during his playing days, he really did look like Jesus Christ of Bethlehem, or Nazareth. McGuinness is from Glentees. Kieran MacDonald was a maverick. Certainly with his play on the pitch, but especially with the hairstyles that he brought to the GAA. He's the only man that could get away with cornrows at Croke Park, and that is facts.
Okay, that was Finchy's look at the best GAA haircuts. I don't know. Mark Vaughan for me, lads. Does anyone current? PJ and Gary are joining us, obviously, to guess the handicaps. Anyone current? There's very, very homogenous haircuts in the GAA these days, isn't it? Everything's just...
Yeah. Keane Lynch had this mad mop of like bleach blonde hair last year, which it didn't last very long.
It's ruined in hurling by the helmets. It has to be said, though, isn't it? There's no opportunity for it. I think Conor McDonald had a pretty good haircut for a couple of years, but so few people would know about it, lads.
I can't believe he left out Fat Larry, Anthony Finnerty. It was like a combination of Tom Parsons and Jim McGuinness. So it was just kind of curly mop and also a mullet at the same time.
Exactly. It's like he's got all the natural tendencies of Tom Parsons. Tom Parsons didn't have a haircut; he just had hair, you know. But yeah, Larry, or Anthony, as his actual name was, he could have
great thing.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's haircuts for you, lads. We've already gone on. We're an hour 15 into the show. We've been talking about hand signals, Gaelic football, and a lot of hurling with Shane McGrath, who was absolutely fantastic earlier on in the show. And we've even got some haircuts in. So we've left ourselves just enough time to guess the handicaps on all 5 of the provincial football games that are on at the weekend. Gary is the reigning champ, as usual here. PJ's vowed all week. The trash talk has been unbelievable in our Slack channels as PJ's vowed to knock him off his throne. All he has to do is check the website where the results are, but he's vowed not to do that. Instead, he's going to guess them. We're going to start with Saturday's Munster semi-finals, starting at 3 p.m. in the Gaelic grounds, the LIT Gaelic grounds, where Limerick talked a bit about Limerick with Darren O'Sullivan last week and their unbelievable improvement over the last few weeks and how they might fancy themselves to knock off Cork. PJ, as a challenger in these the rules that I make up every week, completely afresh, I'm going to let you go first in this one.
It's been like I think as we discussed, it's been a really good year for Limerick so far. I mean, like nearly stay in Division 3, like near like they won 2 games, like lost Tip and Wicklow, but I feel like this is going like Clare, you know, this is going to be like the end of their good year. Like it's an interesting Cork team to me because they have a lot of like really good young players coming through. There's like Sean Meehan looks like a really good player in the full back line. Dan O'Denny in the full forward line. A young lad named Colin Mahoney. All these lads are like won an under 20 All Ireland 2 years ago. So they seem to be bringing kind of like a new attitude to this Cork team, which definitely helps. Cork are favourites, I think. Cork -6.
Cork -6. Okay, Gary.
Yeah.
When you're thinking there, actually, I will just mention Chris Quinn makes a very, very good point on YouTube here, where he says, "What about Dublin's Keane O'Callaghan's mullet?" And again,
another mullet hid by a helmet.
Exactly, yeah, but it's definitely there. I got a glimpse of it. It reminds me also of Keane O'Sullivan, who had an interesting haircut or two. Recently retired, but his moustache obviously is the most defining. Thing that he'll have in his career in terms of his hair. Anyway, maybe the All Irelands will define him slightly more. But anyway, Gary, go on. Cork and Limerick. We have Cork -6.
Yeah, like obviously Limerick had a good win last week. It's kind of, at least they got a win under their belt, though, unlike Clare, who got drawn against Kerry in the first round. So Cork will be favourites. I'm going to go -7. I think it might be a little bit more than -6.
Gary, you're just unplayable. Unplayable. It is Cork -7, which I think, again, I would love if I was Limerick. The higher the better if you're Limerick in this game, regardless of, maybe Cork will win. They are obviously rightly favourites, but higher the better here. Let's write them off. So you have a chance to take this one, but we're on safe ground for PJ here. 7 o'clock, Semple Stadium, Munster champions Tipperary versus the up and coming young lads. Hope to put on a show, and if they win, they win in the Kingdom of Kerry. How's this one gonna go?
I wonder, has there ever been a defending Munster champion coming into the championship after being relegated from Division 3 of the league? I'd say it's probably unlikely. But like obviously Tip have had an absolute disaster of a year. This is not the game they want right now, I would say. I wonder, will Kerry have a bit of a leg up after seeing Dublin at the weekend? Like, not exactly setting the world alight. Stephen Cluxton questions there. He probably isn't going to come back, it looks like. So, like, obviously, Kerry are going to be big favourites here. I don't know, pick your number. -12, I'll say, for Kerry.
Okay, PJ, you have a chance here.
Kerry, somehow Kerry against Clare managed to score 322, win by 17 points, but also dampen the hype. It was a remarkable achievement. Like a lot of that had to do with scoring 2 points after the break, before the water break. So I'm sure Peter Keane that'll have made
Third
Peter
quarter.
Keane very, very like, you know, we all know what Peter Keane is like. Peter Keane doesn't like the hype. He'll probably be pretty happy with that. Interesting to see Sean O'Shea playing close to goal in that game. I'll see if that continues in this one. This Tip team, like there is a feeling that they achieved something last year, and then like what more do you think you can do after you win Munster? There probably is a feeling of achievement, and then you know maybe you're not as motivated then like the following year. Also, you consider they are without Colin O'Riordan. Like Colin O'Riordan was so important last year when they like in those winning Munster. I do think that -12 is way too much though. I still think it's like a decent Tipperary team. I'm gonna say Kerry -10.
What did Kerry beat Clare by in the end?
17.
17, right. I think that might have influenced it. As you said, everyone said that Clare played well and Kerry didn't even play that well. This handicap's insane, lads. For Munster champions, it's Kerry -16.
Jade.
Which was exactly my word, PJ, when I saw it. I have to say, Gary is once again the 2-0 lead, but I have to say, I'm just perplexed by that. That's and look, they might well beat it. That's the other thing, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move on to Ulster. They're very old school handicaps for the Munster Championship. We're heading towards a Cork-Kerry final, if the bookies are to be believed. Tyrone versus Cavan in the Ulster Championship is also on Saturday, 4:30. And again, the Ulster champions are in action here, and you know they're going to Omagh. Tyrone, I will tell you right now, are favourites, but I won't tell you by how much.
We think about this Cavan team's progression here. We got relegated from Division 1 2019, got to an Ulster final. Got relegated from Division 2 last year, won Ulster. Relegated from Division 3 2021. Probably going to get knocked out.
What would be the next step? Would it be winning the All-Ireland or reaching an All-Ireland final maybe, and then finishing bottom of Division 4 to win the All-Ireland match?
Probably, yeah. Winning the All-Ireland this year would probably be, you know, you don't want to step too many rungs up the ladder at the same time.
No, we wouldn't want to be unrealistic either, I suppose, would we? Yeah,
exactly.
All-Ireland final, that would do.
Tyrone, like you said, Tyrone actually favourites. Interesting, like for a lot of these teams, Ulster, Munster, this is their first game in a month for you know, since the relegation games in the league and the promotion games in the league. Interesting to see how they would use that. Tyrone could have Colin McShane back. I think could be interesting. It'll also be interesting to see how they react to that defeat to Kerry. They actually got walloped Kerry in that league semi-final. And it was interesting. I was listening to a BBC podcast where Thomas Niblock was saying he spoke to Brian Dewar after the Kerry game, and he was like, it wasn't like, oh, you know, we weren't out there with a full team, we weren't trying. It was like they were distraught. They were very, very disappointed with how they played against Kerry. It's very hard to know how to judge this Cavan team. I'm going to say Tyrone -6.
Okay.
Yeah, like obviously Cavan and Kerry at the minute. There's always an Ulster tax, I think, in these sometimes with the handicaps. Like if this was the exact same situation, it's like a similar situation to Kerry and Tipperary, although you would say there's less of a gap between those, and we looked at that handicap. So I think it'll definitely be more than -6. So I'd say -7.
Okay. PJ got it bang on. It's Tyrone -6. And I do think there's an element with the league for me is like, you know, what did Shane McGrath call it last week as useful as a handbrake on a canoe. That was the hurling league. I do think we probably took a little bit more from the football, PJ, but at the same time, you know, from Cavan's point of view, they're going in here as Ulster champions, and like they don't consider this a kind of a lost cause or anything like that. You know, they'll absolutely sort of think they can beat Tyrone if they play brilliantly on the day. I don't know, but the funny you mentioned the Ulster tax, Gary, because the scorelines in the Ulster Championship this year have been, and it's been the case for a couple of years. It's not as open a championship or as close a championship or as every game is possible as people think. Like Armagh won by 4 goals yesterday. Monaghan had a big win over Fermanagh and Donegal hammered down, and they're the 3 games we've had so far have been 3 hammerings. You know, so definitely a good point, I would say, even though it brought you away from the correct score. So 2-1. Gary dominated Munster, but if there's a possibility here that PJ is owning Ulster, but we'll find out now because we're going to Sunday at 4:00 for the other quarter-final to see who will meet Tyrone, you guys say, in the semi-final. It's Donegal at Ballybuffet against Derry. What do you think, Gary? You're up first, sir.
Yeah, interesting game because obviously Derry are coming into this on good form. They actually even had a league final that they played in. And a cracking jersey. Yeah, and a cracking jersey too. Jersey to play football, I would say. But Donegal, then I don't know. Like Donegal are just always you always think they're dependable until they let you down. Then inevitably, every year, I'd still fancy Donegal to win this. I think it could be tight though. I know you're saying there has been some not so tight games, but for the handicap, I would say -4 for Donegal. I think would be about right.
Yeah, I think the big question for this game is, does Michael Murphy play?
Yep.
I mean, like it's
massive.
I think that Donegal should be able to get past. Like Donegal would think of themselves as All-Ireland contenders, rightly, and if you are going to win Ireland, you should be able to win this game without Michael Murphy. And I don't. They should have been able to beat Down. They would have beaten Down. They did beat Down without Michael Murphy. Essentially, like they played for 40 minutes without him. They absolutely hockeyed them. It seemed like an unnecessary risk to play him in that game. Whoever wins this game, you're coming up against the winners of Tyrone and Cavan. You would think that would be Tyrone, but they are favourites, and I think they should be Cavan. So I would rather have him for that game than unnecessarily. I don't see why you risk him in this game. Derry look like a very good team. They do. Like Conor Glass is just come back. He's a year back from the AFL. He looks like he's one of the best players in Ulster. He's could be one of the best players in Ireland. Eventually, Shane McGuigan as well, a really good player for them. I think Donegal are favourites, even if they don't have Murphy. Yeah, Gary's probably about right with -4, but I don't think it'll be -3. So I'm going to say Donegal -5.
Okay, it is Donegal, lads. I'm a bit all over the place with these handicaps this week, but Derry have won how many games by 40 points this year? I know Division 3 is very different to Division 1, but Donegal -6, as people will see on the screen there, is the actual handicap, which means that it's 2-2 here, and we've a 1-game shootout, and PJ is going first. But the bad news is, lads, it's the Connacht semi-final between Mayo and Leitrim, and if anybody gets this exact, you're cheating. So Castlebar Sunday, 2:00. Poor old Leitrim. The winner plays Galway in the Connacht final. We saw what Mayo did to Sligo earlier in the year, or last week, I suppose. And it wasn't too pretty. And you would argue that Leitrim are in a very similar place than Sligo at the moment.
Leitrim actually lost by 7 points to Sligo in the league. That's something to consider here. Leitrim, bottom of Division 3 North. Lost to Sligo, lost to Louth, but then interestingly only lost to Antrim, a good Antrim team, by a point in the final game. They did score 50 points in those 3 group stage games in the league, which is 50 points in 3 games is a good, it's a decent score, I think. It's just Mayo without Kilkenny O'Connor is an also big thing in failure. They have to did okay with it against Sligo last week. Weekend for last, without him. Darren McKay looked like a very good player. Ryan O'Donoghue looks like a reliable player on the frees. A man definitely not lacking confidence. How big do you go on this? Is just Dublin were -24 against Wexford at the weekend.
Which is a record, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be that much, but I had -18 written down here, and the more I think about it, I think Gary is just going to go one more and beat me. I'm going to set a marker for Gary. He's going to go one more and he's going to beat me. But I'm going to say Mayo -22.
Oh wow, you went way off the 18 there. Okay, right. 22.
I would imagine that there would be less of a gap in the bookies between Dublin and Wexford than there would be between Mayo and Leitrim. So for that, and with the fact that Dublin didn't come anywhere close to reaching that record landmark there at the weekend, I'm just going to say -21. I reckon it's going to be about -19, but I'm going to say -21 is my answer.
Reveal it there, Maestro. PJ. You talked yourself out of a victory. Gary, 3-2. Oh, you brought it back to 2-2, and you overthought the last one. The worst thing that happened was you going first for that one. You had the honour. Next week, I'll give it to Gary. I'm determined for you to get a win here. But
these are the mind games. These are the mind games I play, Mick. This is what I do to people. You know, they're overthinking themselves. You've
absolutely perplexed people with your constant victories. You're like the Dubs. I don't know if you're going for 7 in a row like they are, but it can't be too far off at this stage. But thank you, lads, anyway, for a good effort and for another great victory for Gary. PJ can go home and think all week now. He's already at home, actually, but he can stay at home and think all week about how he overthought it. And then next week, don't come in, don't think at all, PJ, and we'll see what happens. But
I'll try not to overthinking. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's guess the handicaps for this week. 5 football games to look forward to at the weekend. We'll talk to Darren O'Sullivan about that on Monday's show. Thanks a million to PJ and to Gary. Thanks to Maurice. Thanks to Finch for his haircuts, and definitely a huge thanks to Shane McGrath for brilliant analysis on the hurling. And thank you for watching. If you are watching on YouTube, please do subscribe to the channel, and you will be let know when we have a new video up. We will be here with you every Monday, of course, for GAA Embedded throughout the season, but lots more on the Balls YouTube channel as well for you to enjoy. And if you're listening on the podcast, please also do subscribe there. We'll be back with you next Monday. Enjoy the football next week.